show empathy with the other is natural in one side. And the other side, we're blocked to give empathy to the one we don't like. Personally, collectively, nation. And the trigger really is to keep working that. And that's what we say in Combatants for Peace. Um, Choosing nonviolence and mercy and forgiveness and love and humanity is a daily choices. Like you make them over and over. It's not one time. You were the bad guy and then you awaken now and you are nonviolent, so you are the good guy now. I think it's tested all the time, especially living in an active conflict right now. Some people might think, oh, this is like utopian ideas. It will always exist, but nothing to do with reality. I actually think, um, yeah, it's important to keep, as we say, one leg in reality and one leg in the dream.
Were you too young to know you were a girl or a boy?
Oh, I hated the skin that I was in. I thought I was ugly. I thought I was unlovable. I couldn't leave my house without people staring at me or making rude remarks.
There is a sense, I think, or a message that many of us have received that it's okay to be a Jew as long as you're the right kind of Jew.
Just imagine what it would be like for you when you get out of prison after, 10 years in there for something you didn't do.
Approximately 6 or 7 policemen attacked me and put in my pocket a big quantity of drugs.
If we can choose how we live well, then do we not have the right to choose how we die well? And how do we do that with dignity?
There's never a moment where I am not in pain. It's exhausting. This bottom line is what it is.
I was born with a congenital indifference. My arm, I have my elbow, but it was like underdeveloped from here out.
54% of those with disabilities are not working. If you're an employer, hire somebody with a disability. You won't regret it.
I've learned that us neurotypical people are the people who really need to learn from neurodiverse individuals. We are the aliens of this planet.
Welcome to Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. This season will inspire you to empathize with people who are regularly marginalized and misunderstood. You won't want to miss a single episode, so hit the subscribe button now. Thanks for watching and enjoy the show. Today, I want to celebrate a special milestone. This episode is number 250 of the Purposeful Empathy podcast. I have loved every minute, and I'm grateful to all my guests who have shared their stories and expertise over the past 5 years. And of course, I want to thank you for watching or listening. Given this milestone episode, I've chosen a conversation that highlights how empathy can unite us in our common humanity. My guest, Sulaiman Khatib, is a co-founder of Combatants for Peace, a joint Palestinian and Israeli initiative that's been nominated twice for a Nobel Peace Prize. In this conversation, we talk about what it takes to move from armed struggle to nonviolent resistance without denying pain or history, why pain is not a contest, and how refusing to compare suffering can change everything. How humanizing the other is a daily practice, especially in times of grief and trauma. How inner transformation is possible despite conditions designed to break the human spirit. What it means to have one leg in reality and one leg in a dream. And finally, the spiritual, political, and radical nature of empathy. If you want a conversation that will expand your empathic imagination by exploring what it takes to humanize people we're taught to distrust, hate, or fear, this show is for you. Next week's episode continues my commitment to holding multiple truths with care. My guest is Rabbi Lisa Grushko, and together we talk about the rise of anti-Semitism and the urgent need for moral courage and empathy across communities and different lived experiences. For now, though, let me introduce you to Sulaiman, a peace builder who believes extending empathy is never a zero-sum game. Welcome to the show, Sulaiman. I am so honored and excited to have this conversation.
I mentioned earlier that I was at a summit, the Interdevelopment Goals Summit in Stockholm 2 years ago, where I heard your colleagues, Rana, and I believe Chen is your co-founder. And ever since then, I have been keen to have a conversation with you or a member of your team. And so thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Thanks for having me.
I believe that this might be one of the most important conversations that we could have. I've spent the last maybe 30 episodes having conversations with people who are often marginalized or misunderstood. And my goal is to help enlarge our circle of empathy for others. So, with that as the backdrop, I wonder, people I think regard you today as a peace builder. But I know from the research I've done, you carry a long personal history that does include 10 years even behind bars for violence committed against 2 Israeli soldiers. I think it might be really important to share your personal backstory so listeners can get a sense of what brought you to this moment and today.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Anita. Thanks for having me here. And yeah, I remember the summit in Stockholm where my brother and friend Chen, as a co-founder of Combatants for Peace, presented there together with our Palestinian director friend, comrade Rana Salman from Bethlehem. And I'm really proud of that. And I know also there is a lot of controversial of whatever we're doing, whatever we're saying. And that's definitely for me, it started with a personal story. And actually in Combatants for Peace, now it's actually, we're commemorating or celebrating the 20 years of Combatants for Peace. So I feel really proud to be part of this creation. Let's call it, to create this third narrative that's emerging. So my background, I actually born in Jerusalem area, Jerusalem Mountain, where I'm actually sitting now. Usually I live in Ramallah, which is half an hour from here. So I grew up in a Palestinian family that actually has a long history of living in this land, in Jerusalem Mountain. So I would say I come from more like of an ancient family in this place, what we call the indigenous people to this land, carrying like a lot of tradition and a lot of trauma, a lot of memories, a lot of art and folklore and so many things. I play the flute also because this is part of the tradition here. Also carrying the historical mission of protecting the land and the tribe and the family and the collective story, honestly. And also I come from kind of activist family. I mean, some of my family members has participated in anti-colonial actions through the history, a pre-Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Like I'm talking about the British time and pre that. So there is a long line of history here. I would like to recognize that. So maybe in a different from my generation, I would say honestly, I become very active since I was like 12, 13, 14 years old. My older brother was in jail, so I had access to political activism, to prisoners and ex-prisoners. So yeah, I started at this time, I would say I was really, as very honest, I was attracted to what we call armed struggle or armed resistance. Um, so yeah, I did everything I could at that time in order to, for all of it is like under the what we call a free Palestine. Like this is maybe the slogan. From throwing stones, writing slogans on the wall, raising the Palestinian flag on the electricity walls, and so on. Um, and learning, look, like when I was 14, I had a little group of 14 years old kids. I was coordinator of the kids. So just to be as truthfully, as honest as possible, this was also a lot of adrenaline and a lot of fun and fear and like all of that, obviously. Like I did everything I could at that time, at this point when I was 14, like throwing stones, cocktail Molotov, and Molotov cocktail, like learning. And when I was 14 and a half, 14 and 5 months, I and with a person from my village, he was 17 and a half, that his family was demolished by the army. And he come from a political family, so they were very angry. So I recruited him to join me in attacking two Israeli soldiers. We stabbed the two Israelis with knives. Yeah, and then this attack ended up with slightly wounded for the two Israelis. They were taken to the hospital, and we escaped from the scene for a couple of days. We didn't succeed to steal, to take their weapons, basically. Yeah, and a few days later, like after the army did the curfew in that village, and they put they draw us and they put it in the TV. It was like a big news, and then we end up in jail. So me and this guy and also my group. So this is my background before jail. And then I end up I was the youngest political prisoner for a while. I was 14 and a half. So I was going through the investigation time, which include a lot of physical and psychological torture. Um, until I became 15, I was sent to the military court. This where we live under a military Israeli occupation control. So basically, the court is also a military court with 3 judges and so on. I became 15. I was sentenced to 15 years in jail. During the jail time, my room in my family house was blocked with cement and iron by the army as a punishment for the family. These practices exist still until now. So I spent 10 years and 5 months in jail, like more than 2/3 of the period in jail. Yeah, yeah, so basically I played my role as a Palestinian as like a heroic action of, of like resisting the system and the occupation during that time. Um, and so the jail time is like a long, long period, but I'm happy to share also about that if you wish.
Well, that's my next question, actually. So I understand that while in prison, you went deep into the teachings of Gandhi and King and Mandela, and find yourself now firmly grounded in nonviolence and inner transformation. I recently had an interview with a military vet, an American vet who served in 2 combat missions in Afghanistan and Iraq for the US Army, and not only suffered from PTSD, but shared what he now understands as moral injury, and was actually, I had never heard of this, but they have a Center for Moral Repair, which I find really quite an inspirational framing of things. So I wonder if you could describe your own soul's evolution through that period.
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with the moral injury part. Um, so in my case, honestly, I would say my transformation, to say, my change happened through a long, long journey and through very practical also experience. Um, so when I was 15, for example, alongside other political prisoners, we did a food hunger strike for 16 days. And this was my first time to be hungry. And during this food hunger strike, we just drank a lot of water and salt. In Arabic, it's called mayo milh. It's very famous in our culture and our experience. So basically, um, this was my first encounter of a real nonviolence action, despite all the power dynamic, in solidarity with the community, with the group, with the prisoners, and we always succeed, basically to achieve our demands, which is around um, improving the daily life the conditions in jail. Basically, that's the goal of the hunger strike, not to die, rather to improve the conditions. And the last hunger strike was for 17 days with 4,000 political prisoners across all jails. We coordinated this very well. I have to give credit also to the Irish hunger strike story in the 80s, I believe. That's how we learn about it. So this is for me a very harsh, non-easy experience where you got really skinny, you think just a lot about food and you learn patient and so on. But in practice, this is where not it answered the question that's really controversial about nonviolence because many people don't believe that nonviolence work. In my experience, it was very practical experience. Obviously, I developed that through also later on. I worked in the library. I studied a lot about other conflicts, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Mandela was in jail, which is very important to Palestinian prisoners. And obviously from our own culture, I would say, because I come from a community where we practice something called sumud. Sumud means steadfastness and resilience. And this is very also spiritual. Um, and it's connected to the trees and the olive trees and so on. So, yeah, that did help me to change my worldview, I would say, alongside reading books and other experiences in jail. With that said, I'm always careful to say that jail is not a peace academy. I just want to make this very clear. Um Obviously, my journey personally was, as I said, like before, was like a long, long journey of practices and so on. It's not like one night I slept and in the morning I wake up, I'm falling in love with the enemy. That's not really my story, to be as honest as possible. And, finding a common ground or finding, like what they say, like turning the other into a brother. I grew up also, in Abrahamic family. I come from a Muslim family. I was not religious, to be truth, but a bit spiritual. And, I obviously, when I was 15, I read Jesus, that come from this land, right? Love your enemy kind of vibe. And it's not easy. Like, it's not I read it and wow, this is like me from now on. That's not exactly. It's like a gradually. And obviously, there is a lot of like, from our own culture, the cousin of Muhammad, the famous Ali bin Abi Talib wisdom, like we read his books around, um, things like, I'm trying to translate from Arabic to English, meanwhile, that says, don't do, like basically, it's about, not to do mistakes that we will lose friends rather do good and turn these friends into, like, turn the enemy into a brother. So, it's in the same direction. It's in the religious, Abrahamic religion, all of them, and beyond that, obviously. And these ideas were really attractive to me, actually, I have to say. And it needs a lot of work, inner work, to go there, especially coming from, the power dynamic, the occupation, being in jail, but also the history and the losses, obviously. So this is really um, um, a very, yeah, this is like very, for me, it was very interesting journey, personally, I have to say. But also, it's not a mainstream thing. It also encounter challenges with your comrades in the rooms in jail and so on. I studied also Hebrew to learn your enemy's language, which I actually knew some Hebrew from home, but a little bit music and so on, because my father used to work in Jerusalem municipality where he spoke Hebrew fluently. And of course, my language is Arabic. So I think also studying the narrative from different sides has helped me also to, I would say, like a humanizing each other, and the curiosity. And this takes long time with experiences in reality in jail that I come to basically conclusions in a very short cut. One, that there is no military solution for our cause. And I believe this is very controversial, but I believe it's still valid until now, especially now. The second thing, um, I would say, it's about the victimhood thing. So, we come from a place where everybody feel victim for good reasons, for real reasons. I have to say, even the both sides, actually, even the Israeli side, which is the more power, and they're in charge of the land here and the people. Still, if you ask Israelis, the trauma, the Holocaust, and many other things are carrying through generation. So there is also a lot of victimhood. For me, I really look at the victimhood thing is like from a very sensitive place where I believe I have a choice. I believe I'm more stronger than the conditions around me. And as Palestinian, I feel we are much more morally stronger than we think. So I didn't really feel weak during jail time, generally, honestly. Um, yeah, and that helped me and maybe some others to stay strong. Uh, while in touch with reality, obviously, and the pain and the suffering and the torture and the tear gas and everything, but my heart was always was open and my soul and yeah, I come to a place where my freedom it doesn't conflict with the freedom of Israeli or the other way around, and rather the opposite. In my mind, there is no freedom of one side of the story in this land. It doesn't exist.
So this journey that you took, I wonder how you reintegrated back with your family and friends. How was the reunion and the conversations and the relationships? How did they evolve as a result?
Oh wow, this is a very important question. Always like Anita, look, to be truth, as I said, like I come from family that were very faithful to the Palestinian cause, and they're suffering. They suffered in the past, still suffering. We lost a lot of my family land from the area. Many of my relatives were in jail and so on. It's not easy. And my circles, like I was part of this community of prisoners, ex-prisoners, and so on. So I know a lot of people, and it's not easy to come out with non-mainstream ideas to say. So I know what I'm saying is very controversial and it can trigger a lot of people. Um, so as I said, like I believe I always have choices, even in the hardest situations. Um, and I love to follow my heart, to be truth, yani, and I love to do what I believe is the right direction. And being aware that I'm gonna lose some positions and some people, which happens unfortunately, but it's part of the evolution and the changes happen. So I did through the years after jail, I was part of different Palestinian voices that call for nonviolent intifada, for example, and that set me in a place where I have to either me or others would cut connection in many cases, including harsh conversations with the family. Yeah, like for a long time, our relatives and friends and former comrades from jail time, of course. Um, with that said, I have a chosen community to call it, which is the new people that I align with them, whether they born as Palestinian or born as Israelis. So for me, I feel much more free in this chosen family with all the problems, um, um, like I believe I like this statement from, I believe, Hannah Arendt says we need to pay extreme attention to the facts and we need to push our imagination to its limits. So between this and that, I'm swimming between both. So when I have a conversation with someone that really live in this reality under the occupation and so on, of course I'm aware of it, I will live it. I come from here, and the fact I was in jail, it gives me some kind of credibility to some level. Still, people will criticize you no matter what, like everywhere, right? Um, yeah, so I feel really, I don't hide my activism. My profile is really public, and I post my activism. I don't have problem to pay the price for my beliefs. Not in the past, and not now, and not in the future, hopefully. Yeah, so I'm really fulfilled with what I'm doing also.
So let's talk about that work. You're one of the co-founders of Combatants for Peace, which describes itself, and I'm quoting the website, a grassroots movement of Israelis and Palestinians working together to end the occupation and bring peace, freedom, and safety for all people between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. So what's the backstory to Combatants for Peace?
Mhm. Yeah, so we're talking about almost 20 years, even a little bit more, maybe the secret meetings. So we're talking about the time of like 2004, 5, 6, that time. That was the context, it was the Second Intifada. Um, so a group of Israelis that we didn't know has really issued a statement of refusal to the army. And we knew about them through the media, the Israeli media. I read Israeli media all the time. I know Hebrew, as I said, for example. And the Palestinian side, as I said before, I was part of Palestinian voices that call for non-violent intifada. So through a mediator, like a common friend of ours, that was from Bethlehem, that has Israeli activist friend activist, that he spoke both languages, suggested that we meet with this group. And we did, of course, after hesitation and suspicious. We live we're like supposedly the enemy, right? We don't really trust each other as two sides, right? So we did, also logistically, it's complicated, but also politically and psychologically and so on. We didn't have permits to go to meet them in Jerusalem. They can't enter certain Palestinian areas, that controlled by Palestinian Authority. So we made arrangements and we met them in Bethlehem um, for a couple of times. Yeah, and this was really like, before that was all theory, but now it's like a real thing. Like you meet the enemy, like you are talking about people that they just left the army right now, officers, and some of them from special forces and so on, and pilots. And so it brings a lot of trauma and a lot of suspicious. And we thought they belonged to the Israeli intelligence, and this is like a game. They thought we belong to Palestinian resistance or will kidnap them and so on. Now when I look back, I'm laughing because like some of them are now my like very close comrade and friends over the years. But building the trust took long, long time. We came as like with our full truth. They came with their truth. And without facilitation or knowledge in advance, we don't know where this thing going and the name and the slogan and the exact wording, but we come with the intention to explore a possibility of finding common ground, um, to end the occupation and to promote nonviolence, and to work together to make peace and freedom and safety for our peoples in both sides. Uh, and I think 2006, I believe, like 16 or 17 of April of 2006, we come to a place where we're ready to launch this group publicly. And before that, so many meetings, as I said, secret meetings. Obviously, Anita, some people stayed, some people left. That's how it works. With a lot of fear, but a lot of like hope and togetherness, we launched the organization with a big event we did outside of Jerusalem where both sides can come. Hundreds of people came and media and so on. And it was amazing, actually. And since then, the organization, the movement, still around, one of the main joint spaces in the land.
I noticed on your website that the organization has 5 beliefs, main principles that you espouse. So one of them is nonviolence, another is co-resistance, collective liberation, peace rooted in justice and equality, and shared humanity. So I'd be happy to hear you speak to all of those and what you hope listeners might take away from that, those ideals. But as somebody who studies the power of empathy, I'm particularly drawn to the notion of shared humanity. Okay. And I'm going to read carefully what is written on the website again, because I think it describes it so beautifully. Quote, "We recognize the pain and human suffering of both Palestinians and Israelis. We refrain from comparing or competing about who is suffering more because we know that pain is not a contest. Every human life is valuable. As a movement that puts human lives at the center of its activity, we insist on keeping our hearts open to the suffering of both peoples and our minds open to the perspectives of both Palestinians and Israelis. Second paragraph, and thank you for indulging me. I get goosebumps under my sweater when I read this.
Mm.
It is not us or them, but us and them. Both peoples have a past and a future in this land, and both are deserving of dignity, security, and peace. We commit to rejecting narratives that dehumanize the other and stand together in solidarity with the shared belief that no one should be exposed to violence, oppression, or injustice. Would you like to say to that?
Yeah, I also got something in my body when you were reading, actually. Because I think everything you read, like all the meanings, all the senses here, they actually exist in each one of us. And that's actually, for me, the first thing we speak about reconciliation is really humanizing each side, all the sides. And unfortunately, I think it's really important to highlight the humanization and the dehumanization in a conflict zone everywhere, not for Palestinian Israeli exclusive. I mean, it's everywhere now, unfortunately. But humans, like even the tribal conflicts, the same. But if I focus a little bit on our cause here, definitely there is a lot of dehumanization in the media, in the public discourse, in the political speeches and so on, and that allow the hatred and killing and so on, obviously. Um, it's, I would say, even humanizing the other is not simple thing. I have to say, even the personal level, when you have a conflict with somebody, a lover, a family member, right? Once you humanize them and you give a bit of legitimacy to part of their narrative, which doesn't have to be true. It's the narrative they tell, right? It actually makes you stop and think, and it makes you see them as fully as a human. It makes you. So I think this is my invitation here. Uh, is really for all of us, all the listeners and the people, to really reconsider the humanization of the people they don't like or they hate, and the others, and the one that different from their color and their religion and their everything. So I think it's a big part of everything we do in Combatants for Peace and other organizations, just to mention, is really going through a long process of humanizing each other without necessarily agreeing on everything. It's part of humanization is really not to agree on everything. And the beauty is really to come together knowing we are different. And this is what kept Combatants for Peace together, especially over the years, with the occupation happening daily. While we're talking now, the settlers are taking over West Bank, where I live, literally. In the last 2 years, the genocide happened in Gaza, the Hamas attack on October 7, and so many times with the violence happen, whether from this side or this side. There is a lot of test for our unity in the organization because talking about peace and love is so easy if from a privileged place, but when we are hurt, that's really not easy to practice all this beautiful. You spoke about empathy. I studied personally a little bit and somehow in Combatants for Peace, nonviolence communication, which I guess you know that book. Um, yeah, to show empathy with the other is natural in one side. And the other side, we're blocked to give empathy to the one we don't like. Personally, collectively, nation. And the trigger really is to keep working that. And that's what we say in Combatants for Peace. Um, Choosing nonviolence and mercy and forgiveness and love and humanity is a daily choices. Like you make them over and over. It's not one time you were the bad guy and then you awaken now and you are nonviolent, so you are the good guy now. I think it's tested all the time, especially living in an active conflict right now. So for me, everything you saw on our website here, all the languaging, it doesn't really even matter for me, the languaging. It can be right much more or less beautifully by the person that wrote this. but it presents the spirit of combatants for peace and the spirit of the dream. And again, some people might think, oh, this is like utopian ideas. It will always exist, but nothing to do with reality. I actually think, um, yeah, it's important to keep, as we say, one leg in reality and one leg in the dream. So I might actually just maybe suggest people to have a look at two movies that made on combatants for peace. One called Disturbing the Peace. That was a couple of years ago. And as a follow-up documentary following the October 7 attack called There Is Another Way.
Mm.
So I think for us actually is the two direction, as I said at the beginning, like one is really resisting the apartheid separation occupation system and the hatred and everything, and building the new that we are seeking. Because you know there is tendency in the activist circles usually is actually just to oppose everything by default. But what are we seeking for? What are we saying yes for? To build a new is also a journey by itself.
You know, you're making me think of something that I was writing about in my book, Purposeful Empathy. I went deep into the philosophy, the neuroscience, the psychology, the historical nature of empathy, and I came to the conclusion that empathy is radical as a political act and as a spiritual act. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that you don't want to accept the status quo if the status quo is painful for anyone. And at the same time, it requires radical humility to extend an opening to humanize another and hear another and see another with softer eyes. So anyways, I admire the work that you do. And now you are celebrating your 20th anniversary. Congratulations. Are
Thank
there
you.
a couple of stories that you could share over the past couple of decades that captures the heart of what the movement actually makes possible?
Yeah. Um, I mean, maybe in other occasion we can definitely do evaluation of the 20 years where we learn a lot of lessons. Where we succeed in some micro causes and some uh, macro where we fall also. It's really important actually for me to be stay in the humbleness and say we also fool to achieve so many things we want, which is okay. This is part of humanization. And I'm proud also to say that our work together through 20 years has really successfully brought together, just to give like quick maybe examples, even though I'm not really a number person like mathematics, but for example, we try to create a new narrative, as I said, like a third narrative, we could call it, that recognize the connection of both people to this land and recognize the challenges also. So we started almost 20 years ago, like doing the joint memorial ceremony, which is a memorial ceremony that the Israeli side has doing it for the Israeli victims of the conflict. So we start to do alternative one. Almost 20 years ago, we have 70 people attending, and nobody even knew about it than us. And the next year, we have 200 people. A couple of years later, we actually have thousands of people joining and became a very big event. It's actually become the biggest event in the Israeli side, for example, after the governmental one. Really huge. And then in Corona, we start using Zoom, and then we had almost 200,000 people watching. So this became a global thing. This is just one example where we can prove the possibility. That's our actually mission. One of part is really to show what's possible, because most of people believe what's happening now is normal. This is how it works. Now the Israelis in charge. They can do whatever they want. In the future, we will be more the opposite, the other way around, and we're going to this cycle. So I think it's really important to show the possibility, and that's why the movie called "There Is Another Way," and the transformation that many people go through our encounters with them, talking to young Palestinians and young Israelis also, pre-army in the Israeli side and Palestinians that In universities, we have something called freedom schools for youth to teach nonviolence, and there is another way. And so many encounters happen with individuals and groups, locally and globally, actually, um, that so many people like got inspired and become activists themselves.
Mm.
So I that actually, yeah, just holding into this light, because the system. You said something I really also agree with, that empathy by itself is a radical act. And this empathy among us and this friendship is a radical act at this point of history. Definitely, it's like a radical intimacy, like Khen Alon says all the time. Um, and actually, the system that based on separation, the fact we actually got together, it's by itself is really radical. So I think actually showing morality and empathy with the other side, what we call the other side, is revolutionary by itself. That's based on in love and forgiveness, and also in reality that we connect to this reality. So I feel really blessed to be part of this journey. Um, I feel like really lucky even that I'm part of this journey actually. And I'm aware and recognizing that we didn't achieve ending the occupation and big, like peace agreement between our two sides, rather, obviously. Um, but, we work in a long run, and here I want to bring something that I learned from our culture. We're very connected to the olive harvest, to the olive trees. And something I learned from my childhood, we say in Arabic, I'm translating, they plant and we ate, and we plant and they will eat, which means our work is not necessarily for our generation. So we're planting seeds and trees for the next generations.
Mm. And so I guess it's no wonder maybe that given the work that you are doing to lift us to the higher angels of our beings, or whatever that expression is,
Yeah.
the organization, you've been nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize. I wonder what that means for you.
Actually, they were nominating Khen Alon and myself twice. Um, yeah, we felt seen basically and recognized by some people.
Hmm.
We didn't receive it, but which is really okay. We're not doing this to receive award, but it's just for us. We are tools,
Hmm.
and the more important than us is the message itself. Obviously, the messengers are important, as we say, not just the message, um, to bring attention that there is another way to the reality. And that's by itself is a big thing, because I was with him now in a conference in Thailand, uh, organized by the and actually we're speakers there, and I met a group of Palestinian delegates from a university in Toronto, I believe, in Canada. And it was really exciting. They spoke to me. They didn't know I have Israeli partner with me. So I told him, give me a minute. I need to mediate here. I need to tell them I'm here, because they were with kufiyas and, youth and exciting. And so I need to tell them that I'm here with Israeli activists, and to share with them who you are, so they will feel comfortable. If you come, shake hands, and this, it's very sensitive time. And I spoke to them. Obviously, I also said I was in jail and this and that. That always helped me. Um, and when I told them, they said, "What? Israeli here with you?" They were shocked at the beginning. And one of them said, "I never heard that there is an Israeli that opposed the system. Never ever. Is this exist?" Told him, "Yeah, there is a live example. I will call him to come. Let's have lunch together. And you guys feel free to ask him anything. He's a really close friend. You don't even have to agree on anything. But my mission is rebuilding bridges." So I was really happy that this meeting happened. And it's always like uh, using the wisdom and like the knowledge we have, and um, the languaging that we created, that we found through the years together, because we have almost needed to find language for this new narrative, to say, than the one we know before, from this side and that side. And in that sense, I feel a lot of revolutionary energy coming to us, and I feel a lot of responsibility um, to find the language where also our peoples can connect with us.
Well, so that maybe brings us to this next question. I know that you've recently, more recently anyways, launched a new initiative called Ripples Collective that brings together former fighters, prisoners, and civilians from opposing sides to facilitate dialogue and deep personal storytelling and listening. I understand that the core philosophy is that sustainable peace doesn't begin with politics or even agreements. It begins with human transformation and restored empathy, one relationship at a time. So I'm curious to know what you think about what kind of inner transformation is required to stay committed to nonviolence when grief or rage or trauma are constant companions.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'm together with other friends, comrades coming out of this community. This is not really directly related to Combatants for Peace. This is more also for other things that I'm involved with the music and singing and um, collective liberation rituals, storytelling and grief circles and other tools we do, and we do that in different also festivals and some spiritual circles. It's a bit different approach, I have to say, but it's not conflicting with my work and activism and peace building in Combatants for Peace. Rather, it's completing each other. Um, I think there is no one, like if we talk about theory of change, there is no one way or there is no one strategy that can really get us from where we are here to a collective liberation. And that's why I believe there should be different groups and different organizations that are not working against each other. And I want to be truth. Unfortunately, within our circles, once you don't agree, people don't work with each other. Unfortunately, this actually has to be addressed to be truth and honest, because also a lot of the inner work didn't really happen, and I think there is a lot of work. I don't expect everybody to do that, but I'm just thinking that whoever has the opportunity and the desire, the choice to do the inner work, I believe the inner work and the outer work are equally important. This is what I'm trying to say. And in that sense, I want to mention, because we speak about spiritual circles, I think some spiritual, with my respect, some spiritual activists, to call them, are really disconnected from the reality, honesty, where people just work on their inner work and they don't really connect with what happened in their real world. This privilege, I'm not in that. There is the other side of the story where many direct action activists, full of anger, which is important energy to work with, um, they just do the work against whatever the system and everything. But there is no really connection to the spirit. So I feel these two, like, in the two sides of the story, we need something in between that really combine actually the inner work and the outer work, and that's really beautiful. And that's where I'm engaging with Rebels Collective uh, and other groups, really to bring the political and the spiritual and all the levels to the table. And that's, I feel every time really uplifted and I feel really moved each time we perform. And I saw in some performances we did, I think last year in London, in the Medicine Festival outside of London, like 500 people were attending and they stayed with us for like the whole evening, like 3 4 hours, because what we are touching is really something inside each one of us. Everyone is seeking liberation, everybody is seeking freedom, and I totally believe in this like statement that there is no one free until we're all free. It's not just a statement, it's really true, and we all one and we're all connected and we're all a human, and as long as part of us are living above other part, we are not free, and that's the heart of this.
I wish you much success with that work. Sounds
All
beautiful. I
the
hope I can participate someday. I would love to see that unfold. In 2021, you published a book entitled In This Place Together, A Palestinian's Journey to Collective Liberation, and you co-authored it with Benina Eiberg Schwartz, an American Jew. I'm curious to know motivated you to work on the book collaboratively and what you hope readers will take from it? And would any part of the book be different if you wrote it today?
Well, yeah, so obviously the book, like you mentioned, was published 2021, a couple of years ago. Since then, I'm evolving and changing all the time and learning, especially in the spiritual part of my journey, honestly. But the main like direction of the book, actually, I'm committed and I feel exploring myself more and more into, as I mentioned before, like collective liberation, which we used in the book. Now it's become a bit more popular, people using this more and more. I didn't invent that, but I'm happy that we wrote it in the headline of the book, and I'm happy that more and more people using that because the idea is really is not owned by us, basically. Um, I like to bring my ideas, to say my ideas to from like closed rooms, from speaking to groups into a bigger like circles. And so yeah, some people told me, oh, your story interesting, maybe you should share it in a book and this and that. And Nina was really a good friend of mine. I know also her family. And I choose her to write the book. She's a amazing writer, actually. And the heart of this actually is really to say there is no us on them. There is no zero-sum game, as we spoke before, right? And I tried like that when I was 14, right? This zero-sum game, arm struggle. And by recognizing the humanity and the legitimacy with the other side, what we call, I'm not losing my own narrative or my own story, rather the opposite. I feel even much more grounded, much more stronger, actually. And trying to create this unknown new third story, third narrative that everyone from all sides can feel recognized and seen. And we shared a lot also part of, maybe to mention here, part of the conflict resolution that I learn, and we learn a lot from Western books. I want to mention in our own tradition, there is a process called sulha, which means reconciliation. That started, the key of that is actually recognition. It's very important in terms of conflict resolution, in terms of whether in the national level or in the tribal level. But this is tribal system where a lot of our people still practice this, like my family. And I think this also can touch deeper the trauma, the generational trauma, which is not touched by the peace agreements that happened before, like Oslo Agreement and others. So I think using the personal stories in the book and the connection and history. I love history. I read a lot of history. And I feel very connected to this story here on the land. And I feel this land was never from the history, never ever by any narrative even owned, which is controversial because my grandfather time, my ancestors used to say, we belong to the land, not we own the land. But whatever term we use, this land was never belong or giving to one group of humans. Never by any narrative, actually. And it will never be. And that I am struggling also for this land to have diversity of people. And I love that personally. And I grew up in Jerusalem. For me, it's very important to see so many ideas, so many different people, colors. And this is the default of the name of this Levant, of this mirroring of the world, because this conflict is a kind of central for the world, right? The whole world looking at this, that it's the energy that we bring. So I believe if we manage to make peace and freedom for people that live in this land, I believe this will really reflect in the global peace and love, or conflict, or anything. This is very central place for good and bad reason, but I don't know. But this is not a local thing. And it's very central to the world. So I hope more people, whoever, for the readers, I mean, whoever need to read and to open their heart, the book will reach them. So the book is out there, like people can, like I don't control the selling the book and this and that we have, so it's online and yeah.
Well, we'll include a link to buy a copy along with the links to the couple of movies that you've referenced and other links so that
Yeah.
people can learn more about the work that you do. I mentioned at the beginning that the intention of this series is to widen our circle of empathy, to include
Yeah.
more and more and more people in our capacity, in our purview of empathy. I'll just share something that I experienced. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to travel to Jordan, and I was speaking in Amman. And I was giving a talk on empathy, and I was asked the question, a very sincere, genuine, heartfelt question from a woman at the back of the room: why don't more people in the West have more empathy for Palestinians?
Mhm.
And it was touching, deeply moving, and I didn't have a good answer. It's a complicated answer. Fast forward to last fall, I was invited to speak at a Jewish temple on Yom Kippur, which is the most holy day of the season of their religious calendar, on empathy. And a woman put up her hand and asked very sincerely and heartfelt, why don't more people here have more empathy for our community as we're going through so much backlash and anti-Semitism? And again, I felt very moved. So I had the chance to interview the rabbi who interviewed me so that we could have a very honest conversation about the growing hate and anti-Semitism playing out in Montreal and in Canada, and it was on the heels of that absolutely terrible terrorist attack in Australia.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot. And so I'm hoping in the same spirit, what do you wish people understood about everyday Palestinian life that statistics or headlines don't capture? And what do we need to know to expand our empathic consciousness towards Palestinians?
Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing these two stories. They represent a lot, actually. As you can see, everybody feel not seen, every side feel victim, all sides. Um, yeah, I would say this two things maybe. There is this saying from, I believe, Abraham Lincoln, maybe said it, or somebody else, like um, around narrative and also empathy, to show empathy to others. Um, if you born where they born, if you grow up and learn where they grow up, you will do the same, right? So that's an invitation for us actually to put ourselves, what we say, in the other side shoes. It's not easy. I know it's not easy to imagine, let's say, somebody, you spoke about the West with Palestinian privilege, someone privileged living in London, in Montreal, or New York, putting their shoes in a Palestinian living in Gaza without home. That's very, I'm aware it's not easy, but I'm aware also, I've seen it also in practice, it's possible. I feel maybe if I put my Palestinian hat now, not the joint Palestinian-Israeli thing, which is hard for me to separate that because we have, like Ken mentioned a few times, he said, I have a binational heart. It's no longer one heart of one side. So I'm also there. I feel really there. That's my truth. So I feel as Palestinian, um, yeah, it happened that I born in this land, um, and I feel not recognized and not seen. It's just like as simple as that. Um, um, and I think most Palestinians feel this way, honestly, especially from the West, but globally also. So there is a lot of pain, a lot of trauma that the world didn't understand our losses of our own homeland, our pain and suffering, and also a lot of dehumanization. A lot of us feel that, that if Palestinian being killed is just another numbers. And people can see the opposite when it comes to Israelis, let's say when I spoke about the hostages, the Israeli hostages, by default, just saying the term is hostages, when they speak about the media, the mainstream media, when they speak about Palestinian prisoners, they don't say hostages. They say prisoners or terrorists. While we are talking about 10,000 Palestinian prisoners. And I'm happy that Israeli hostages has returned home. And of course, we were opposing publicly like any harm to any civilians, obviously from on October 7 and afterwards in Gaza. But it's definitely a deep painful to see that when it comes to these thousands of Palestinian prisoners, some of them minors and women and so on, and some of them has no court even at all, even Israeli court. It's not really recognized as hostages. Many of them kidnapped from their homes. It's just the same. So this inequality is definitely is deep, and we feel it, we see it. I yeah, the invitation really is yeah, it's like we need to expand the circles of people that something I learned is close to the empathy actually, to more noble actions basically. Like in nonviolence communication, there's a whole page around giving is receiving, right? So when we give, actually, we give ourselves actually, and it's also appreciating that sometimes we are in the privileged place to give, um, without and being also question around like saviorism and so on. This is another conversation. Yeah, but taking responsibility and doing action out of good intention is really important. I wish to see empathy with our people, both the Palestinian and Israelis, and to stand for humanity from a good place, not from a guilt place, not from a savior place, not from a racist place of savior or anything. Because I believe we are the only one to save ourselves.
Sulaiman, as I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking of anybody who's been watching and listening all the way till this part of the conversation, for what it's worth, I'm in Montreal, Canada. I see you. I really see you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Penultimate question. We're all born with the innate capacity for empathy, but I think empathy on purpose or taking empathic action requires moral courage. So, what can people do now to flex their empathy muscles vis-a-vis the Palestinian population and the context of the moment?
Mhm. Um, yeah, since we're talking to you, you're in Canada now. I want to say actually, we in Combatants for Peace, we have actually circles that called Friends of Combatants for Peace. We have a big organization in the US, and now we have a European network of Friends of Combatants for Peace. They engage with us in different type of support and solidarity and learning together and so on. So actually, I was told by our directors there is a wish also to have another circle in Canada. So this is an invitation. If anybody interested, they could be in touch with us to create Friends of Combatants for Peace in Canada. That's and now I turn from Combatants for Peace to represent the Palestinian side of the story, and this representation is always like really uh, important, like that comes. So my invitation for people actually that wish to do something for Palestinian, um, um, there is so many like obviously strategies how people can support Palestinians. I'm not gonna go there and tell people what to do because that's a practical. For me, the question always like we have to ask what's the intention, and this is I learned in my spiritual journey. Um, we have a word in Arabic called intention. The intention in Hebrew, kavanah, means we have to ask the intention why we are doing this. So for me, anyone that does action for the freedom of Palestinian people is welcome, except the one doing this in hatred for the Jewish people. That doesn't really morally connect with our struggle. It doesn't actually bring any benefit to our struggle, rather like harming. And for the one that really we know also there are people that want to support the Jewish people or the Israeli in this story by hating the Palestinian and the Muslim and the Arab and so on. Why we have also recognized Palestinian are not all Muslims. We have so many Palestinian Christian and Arab Christian and so on. But I wanna be aware or conscious about the people that want to support one side of the story to keep fighting forever. So I just want to, especially people in power, especially people that have privilege, that we shouldn't superhero the people, especially in Gaza specifically, yani, and now in West Bank as well, actually, and the people in need. Like the Israeli government, they just decided yesterday, actually, to re-control so many areas in West Bank after the settlers has taken over all the water resources in West Bank and Area C. So it's gonna be very tense time coming up, actually. And so I think the international community, the solidarity here is really important to uh, prevent these radicals from taking us into war after war after war, and to show that there is really possibility of peace and love and exploring a common ground and shared future for our people here. It's very important for me not to lose touch with the reality, and also not to lose a sight of a different future and the dream, despite all the challenges. And I have to say the system has successfully managed to remove the imagination from the head of people. People can't imagine something else because that's what we know, and we have to bring the imagination back of more humanity.
Yes, Dr. Muhammad Yunus calls that social fiction. And if we're able to create science fiction, and lo and behold, 10 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, science fiction comes to reality, so too it could be with social fiction. My last question is the same for all my guests, and that is, can you think of a time in your personal life, could be 5 days ago, could be 50 years ago, well, maybe you're not quite so old,
Yeah.
when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you?
Mm. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I can think of one very strong like moment. It just came to me now because I didn't think about this question. Yeah, I've been in one circle of, I would say, yeah, like in a kind of a trauma healing circle that has Palestinian and Israelis. And yeah, an Israeli person, friend that was in this journey with us, actually, he came and apologized to me. Yeah, this was really, yeah, very strong, really powerful, and stayed with me. And that's why when you ask now, this is the first thing that came to my mind and to my heart. And so I felt really, the apology was really from the heart, and the whole thing was from the heart with the hug, with, you know, uh, yeah, and then I apologized to him. Yeah, like it really opened my heart. So I think also it's more than empathy, also empathy and the power of forgiveness, actually, and asking to forgive. It's very strong from a very powerful place, not from a weak place, actually. Yeah, this was very, yeah, very strong, powerful.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. I can very visualize that, and I feel the intensity of that. I asked this question. I'm coming on my 250th episode, so more than 5 years of
Oh,
taping this
good
show.
luck. Well,
Thank you. And in the early days, I didn't ask this question, and then somewhere along the lines, I started. So I think I've heard maybe 200 answers to that question, and I never know what I'm going to get. But I love doing these interviews, and I love asking this question because it regrounds me in my faith that if we just made the decision to turn up the volume of empathy in our lives, or maybe in this case, empathy plus forgiveness,
yeah,
that we could change the world, literally.
yeah,
Yeah.
I fully agree. Yeah, in Arabic, it's the word are really of empathy, very warm. It's called, means ta'atuf, to show empathy to others. It's very beautiful value. It touched the heart that the moment you say it, even just literally. So for me, like the moment I see it's written empathy somewhere, in Arabic or in English or in Hebrew. Uh, yeah, it melt my heart always. So this is really, I agree. Like it's a way for like really changing the world changing the world alongside other ways. Yeah.
Mm. Well, thank you, Sulaiman, for your time and for all the work and dedication you are putting towards peace and justice and safety and security and humanity for all. I hope you say hello to your family for me when we get off this call. And I want to thank everyone who's been watching and listening. We'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.
Thank you, Anita. This is really, I'm moved in my heart. So thank you. I always love when it's from the heart, not just intellectual. And that's maybe the last invitation for people is really not to shut their heart and bring the mind, rather we come all full truth.
If you know someone who would benefit from this episode, please share it with them now. Post the link to your socials and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. The world needs more empathy and you have an important role to play.